Leaders at the Defense Logistics Agency say they're still assessing the effects of a new return-to-office policy. So far, they say, it doesn't appear to have had a serious impact on recruiting and retention. DLA's new policy is one of the more rigid ones in the federal government, and it's generated widespread complaints in the workforce, but officials say it's necessary as part of a broader effort to transform the agency. Details now from Federal News Network's Jared Serbu.
DLA's new policy took effect in January. It requires all employees to be in the office at least 3 days a week. That, in and of itself, isn't especially unusual amongst federal agencies. What's more unusual is that employees and supervisors have no say over which days those are. All 18,000 of the agency's telework-eligible workers are required to report to the office on the same days every week, Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays. Several DLA employees tell Federal News Network that policy is significantly more restrictive than even the rules that were in place before COVID. Brad Bunn is the agency's vice director.
I know for many it's not the most popular change that we've made in the agency over the past several years, but given the requirements that we're facing, the urgency and the speed at which we need to make these changes, the agency made that shift and brought folks back and standardized when folks are together, right? So we already are challenged with a very geographically dispersed workforce, given where our MSCs are and how our headquarters elements are dispersed throughout the agency. We wanted to have a process where we could bring folks back and have the environment where we could bring those changes and use that collaboration and integration to drive those solutions.
Bunn speaking to employees at a town hall meeting earlier this month. As part of a return-to-work survey Federal News Network conducted last month, with responses from thousands of federal employees, several DLA staff told us the rigidity of the policy has created new financial hardships for employees and made the agency overall a less attractive place to work. Several also told us that they're finding themselves less productive when they're in the office than when they're working remotely. Lieutenant General Mark Simmerly, the agency's new director, acknowledges there may be some truth to that productivity point on an individual basis, but right now DLA is hyper-focused on problems that cross organizational and functional boundaries.
We are improving our ability to tackle and solve collective problems by physical presence in the workplace. And I've heard the phrase, I know many of you use it before, presence for a purpose. And I think sometimes people think about presence for a purpose being presence for a task, and that may be an appropriate application for some folks. I think also part of the purpose is team building, is innovation, that is just very difficult to conjure in a virtual setting. And I just know from my own personal experience, I run my best wind sprints when I'm with a group or with a team, right? And I think we can achieve our best results. We can encourage each other. We can problem solve. We can innovate when we are standing shoulder to shoulder. We can be, in some cases, many cases, individually more productive. But I don't know if we can be as productive as a team when we operate in isolation and separately.
But DLA officials say the new telework policy isn't set in stone. They say they're carefully watching workforce data and gathering employee feedback. So far, though, they say there aren't any obvious indications that the policy has hurt hiring or retention. The number of people applying for DLA positions is down about 5% compared to last year, but retention is up from 2023. Again, Brad Bunn.
My initial assessment is I think it's having the intended effect. I'm seeing more collaboration happening in real time. I'm seeing shorter lead times to solutions. So we're starting to see that traction there. But nothing is set in stone. We'll continue to assess that whole posture over the next year or so, and then we will work with our J1 policy experts, along with our employee representatives, working with General Simmerly under his leadership to determine what the best approach is going forward into the future.
As far as the big transformational organizational changes DLA is trying to achieve, Simmerly says they're largely about putting the agency on a combat footing and getting DLA to think about how to operate in an era of great power competition in much the way the military services are.
The nature of warfare is changing. When we think about logistics and the way it's delivered from port to fort or from factory to foxhole, it's significantly different than it ever has been. So we call that contested logistics. competition is the state that we're in largely now. That could move into crisis, and that could move into direct conflict. In some ways, we're already in conflict, especially in the cyber realm. And it's not just us, but I think we should understand that logistics is vulnerable. That's why our enemies will target our logistics capabilities, because they largely rely upon commercial origins, industry, and also in terms of the distribution and storage locations, they're visible. And if anything can be seen on this future battlefield, it will be targeted. And if it can be targeted, it will be destroyed, right? So those are some of the challenges and some change that's taken place across the world that we have to respond to.
As one example of near-term changes Simmerly wants to make to help prepare for that contested logistics future, he says DLA personnel need to be regularly participating in the exercises the military services are already conducting to prepare for possible conflict with China.
As they learn about operating in a contested logistics environment, as they apply capabilities to those problem sets, we have to be shoulder to shoulder with them, learning with those lessons at the same time and incorporating them back here. We can't wait for it to come out in the lessons learned compendium 1 or 2 years later. We have to be learning contemporaneously with them. So exercises, experiments, modeling, all those things we've got to be part of. And we have traditional people that we've been committing to those things over the years. In some cases, we send those people to those things to observe. That's got to change. We have to send people to participate, right? And that might mean we have to send different people. We might have to send people with different skill sets in order to gain the insights that we need to into these events. So we've been doing that. We're going to continue to do that, I think, at a greater scale.
Bunn says at the same time, DLA is making big changes to the business side of its operations that he argues also require more physical presence. For example, the implementation of a new warehouse management system and changing business processes to hopefully pass a financial audit by 2028.
And that's a high-risk proposition given how many notices of findings and recommendations we have. And every one of those corrective action plans is trying to address a pretty gnarly challenge that many of you are working on. Digital business transformation. This is what I call recapitalizing our IT infrastructure, our business systems that we've relied on for many decades, and now we are making a ton of changes in a short, compressed period of time, and it requires us to rethink how we do business. And that is not just a J6 thing, right? That is the business and the technology enablers coming together across multiple functions to make those things happen.
Jared Serbu, Federal News Radio, part of the Federal News Network.
Check out Jared's story at federalnewsnetwork.com.